I'm going to make this very simple for you, Dan. Men should not play sports against women. I'm not going to get into all the bullshit that's going on out here in the world today. If anybody think that, I think they're stupid. I'm not, like I say, I support the gay community 100%. I support the transgender community 100%. But I do not, under any circumstances, under zero, think that men should play sports against women. And if anybody have a problem with that, they're going to have to get over it, because I'm not going to change. I just think it's wrong, period.
Which are what? The science behind this, that men and women are different. And you can call yourself a woman, you can call yourself a cat, call yourself whatever you want, but the facts are what? Trans women are men. And the W in WNBA stands for women.
Before the game, you had a conversation with Sophie Cunningham.
I did.
If you want to share what you talked
Absolutely
about, feel
not.
free. But
Absolutely not.
More of my question is just how important is it to have those like in-person conversations with people that
I think it's
have
great.
different views?
I think it's great. I think both of us understand that we have platforms, and we both talked about wanting to, more than anything, educate. And there are some things that
this dialogue highlights a massive ideological divide currently growing within the professional basketball community. It is a major cultural battleground that is currently testing the league's front office leadership and player relations. This cultural tension has reached a boiling point both on and off the court. Without hesitation, Charles Barkley confronted the exact phrase that almost every major sports analyst has desperately avoided addressing. Barkley strongly supported Cunningham's vocal stance that biological men must be excluded from women's sports. While live on national television, he used the exact same blunt, straightforward tone he has deployed throughout his legendary career, especially when he feels that obvious, common-sense truths are being deliberately overcomplicated. This controversy is creating a massive rift, forcing players to take sides in an increasingly hostile public arena. It places immense psychological pressure on these athletes, who are already dealing with intense on-court competition weekly. The resulting media circus has threatened to completely overshadow their actual on-court performances.
I'm never going to think it's all right for men to play sports against women. And I don't even think that's controversial. That's the thing that's funny. Like some of this stuff make, like when you see these debates on television, like, yeah, men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. I don't want to hear you try to explain it to me. No, I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to argue with you. Men shouldn't play sports against women. I'm done. There's a lot of shit we can argue over. That ain't one.
Look at how this entire situation started. During an interview, Cunningham made it crystal clear that athletic matchups should be based on biological sex to protect young girls and women. It was simply a policy viewpoint, offered in response to a direct question. She avoided personal insults or calling out specific individuals. Yet, weeks of intense national backlash was instantly ignited by that single comment. Barkley was referencing that very same quote when he spoke up.
You don't see trans men going and saying, I want to play football. I want to play basketball. I want to be. Why there's no trans men going into men's spaces? Why is it trans women that's going into women's spaces? Show me the last time a trans man was on a podium in any sport. Show me the last time a trans man won in cycling, cross country, football. They played on the team, volleyball team, track and field, 4x100 meter relay on track and field, steeplechase. Name it. Show me a trans man that have been
proven competitive. Show me just one. Since that pivotal interview, Cunningham's situation has escalated far past mere disagreement. Now, hostile road crowds relentlessly boo her every single touch. Arenas have been plastered with hostile protest banners. Yet, the WNBA remains hesitant to step in and draw the line. It quickly started to look less like fans venting frustration and more like a targeted, coordinated campaign to silence a single player for voicing an opinion that many of her peers quietly share. Why are fans relentlessly targeting Cunningham at every single stop? It is wild that the media is painting her as a villain when her only offense was speaking her mind. The intense road hostility here speaks volumes. Every single time she touches the ball in Portland, the deafening boos register clearly on the TV broadcast. Yet, she refuses to back down. Rather than hiding behind a scripted statement, she plays right through the noise, matching the crowd's hostility with clutch plays on the hardwood. But letting the raw performance do the talking, these extreme online detractors are now
protesting her at WNBA games. So much so that a coach from another team pulled Sophie aside to have a few words with her and just let her know what she had thought about what Sophie said. Guys, Sophie Cunningham is probably the most popular athlete in the WNBA. If she goes bye-bye, there is no more WNBA. Additionally, have you ever seen Sophie Cunningham play ball before? What on earth makes y'all think that she cares about a bunch of crybabies complaining about an 80-20 issue? Literally, no one wants men and women's sports. It is highly unpopular, and the only people that do want that are people who have likely never played sports before in their lives.
But that is merely one facet of this hostile environment. During road matchups, targeted banners designed to humiliate her over those viral ESPN comments keep popping up, forcing arena security personnel to intervene when tensions clashes between rival fan groups carrying opposing signs. Grandstand hostility is now soaring. Outside the court is practically unheard of in this league. This alone shows how far the situation has escalated beyond basketball. We were being completely respectful, simply holding our signs and supporting both squads. Suddenly, an older woman approaches us, and at first, I honestly thought she was being friendly, but then she demands to know what we are doing, and her demeanor immediately turns aggressive. She tells us flat out that Jesus loves everyone. I responded that I already knew that, being quite religious myself. Then she snaps back that she hopes Jesus can forgive us for whatever sins we have committed. After that, she starts screaming that we are acting completely insane, demanding we stop, do better and stop pulling these stunts. She kept saying that only God can save our souls. She directly cursed at us, specifically using an explicit word during her confrontation. Did she say effing insane or the expletive? She used the explicit word. And absolutely nobody nearby stood up to defend you? None. I have to be honest, when I walked over, you were literally crying. I have never been screamed at like that. Online hate is one thing, but experiencing that raw face-to-face rage in public is a completely different level of confrontation. Then came the major flashpoint. Seattle Storm co-owner Celeste Keaton aggressively confronted two teenage fans. They were sitting courtside, holding a sign expressing appreciation to Sophie Cunningham for defending women's athletics. The message carried zero malice, targeted no players, and was purely an expression of appreciation. Yet, before long, one young fan was reduced to tears after Celeste Keaton declared their presence unacceptable. Once footage of the encounter went viral, mounting public pressure finally forced the league to fine and suspend Keaton. When Barkley weighed in on television, he did so against the backdrop of this outrage. He was not offering some distant opinion on sports policy. He was reacting to a situation causing actual, real-world harm. Two young fans who came out simply to cheer on their favorite athlete were left deeply shaken by an aggressive executive. It is terrible when an adult in authority targets kids over a sign. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham has stated that biological males do not belong in women's sports. That is it. It is a completely rational, widely held view. This centers entirely on safety and competitive fairness. It is absolutely not some anti-trans campaign. Yet, critics are busy constructing classic straw man arguments, falsely claiming that Cunningham wants to exclude children or promote hate. That narrative is completely disingenuous, highly manipulative, and designed to shut down honest debate. It is a calculated strategy to silence opposing opinions. But Barkley was not going to let it slide. He went beyond backing Sophie Cunningham, issuing a direct, stern warning to WNBA leadership about their handling of the crisis. He warned them to tread carefully, noting that penalizing players for voicing opinions sets a dangerous precedent. This affects everyone under the league umbrella, including players, coaches, and front offices. Because of Barkley's massive platform and history of unfiltered commentary, his words carry immense industry weight. But he was far from the only major athletic figure willing to take a stand. Once those initial televised comments went viral, numerous high-profile names across the sports landscape began offering their own unfiltered takes, completely changing the dynamic of this entire national conversation. Those outside perspectives barely even registered, compared to the WNBA's actual official policy on the matter. She simply stated what she believed was common sense, yet she is taking massive heat for saying biological men should never compete in women's athletics. Why does that trigger such intense outrage? I do not get it. It is a straightforward position. She stood her ground, and I respect players who refuse to fold. When you take a stand, you own it. She voiced her opinion and did not flinch, refusing to retreat despite the relentless wave of criticism coming from her critics. Look, this is an 80-20 issue nationwide. 80% agree with her. Yet that loud 20% is absolutely slamming her. Let them talk. Who cares? I respect her resilience under pressure. She competes with intense grit, and she has serious game on the court. Look, I do not follow women's professional basketball closely, but I respect these two players. Still, she will inevitably face heavy friction from other players in the locker room and across the league. It is a very progressive and heavily gay environment, which is great. I have zero issues with that. My own daughter is gay. I have absolutely nothing against anyone living their life, but the aggressive messaging being pushed on the audience can feel forced. That is why I do not regularly tune in to follow their matchups. Meanwhile, one of the first gridiron stars to vocalize support was former Chicago Bears linebacker Brian Urlacher, who openly questioned why expressing a stance on competitive fairness had been blown up into a national controversy. Former NBA big man and ESPN analyst Kendrick Perkins offered a more balanced perspective, but arrived at a similar bottom line. Competitors must be free to voice their honest thoughts without having their entire campaign hijacked by political debates. Never one to stay quiet for long. Shaquille O'Neal weighed in on his podcast, suggesting the entire situation was heavily blown out of proportion by people looking for a reason to be outraged. And this noise extended far beyond retired legends. Active media personalities and former Olympic athletes quickly entered the chat, elevating this debate way beyond your average morning sports radio back and forth. Media firestorm. Sage Steele, an established voice in the fight for protecting female athletics, stepped forward to directly defend the two teenagers addressed by Keaton, claiming the incident reflected very poorly on the entire Storm franchise. Regardless of individual positions on the actual issue, critics are attempting to weaponize terms like kid and children to manipulate public emotion, rather than focusing on the objective facts and the biological science, proving that men and women are fundamentally different. People can identify as a woman, a cat, or whatever they choose, but the biological reality remains that trans women are male, and that letter W in WNBA stands for women. I honestly despise seeing language manipulated like that. Sophie Cunningham was incredibly direct about her stance from the very start. Though, she did not initiate the conversation. An ESPN reporter asked her a direct question. She answered. And as the backlash grew, she posted on social media to reiterate her position, stating she was not trying to exclude anyone and that everyone is welcome. But this remains the WNBA. Steele's commentary carried weight because she was not analyzing this from inside the league like Charles Barkley was. She evaluated it from an experienced journalist's viewpoint, having spent decades covering intense locker room conflicts, knowing exactly when an athlete is just sharing a personal stance versus launching a personal attack. She maintained that Sophie never crossed any line, and the intense blowback says far more about today's hypersensitive political culture than about her actual comments. Soon, other prominent figures joined the conversation. Former collegiate swimmer and fierce advocate for female sports protection, Riley Gaines, applauded Barkley for using his massive spotlight to champion the exact same message she had been shouting for years, though she approaches the issue as a dedicated activist rather than a media analyst. Soon, golf analysts and several former baseball pros posted their own reactions online, echoing the exact same sentiment that a professional competitor simply speaking her mind during an interview should not trigger a massive smear campaign. Do you believe Sophie Cunningham's remarks were actually transphobic? Absolutely not, Dan. She made a conscious effort to state clearly that she loves everyone, framing this strictly around biological science and athletic integrity. Because, remember, women fought through centuries of deep systemic inequality. We could not even vote, and it really wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of human civilization. Women were completely shut out of basic financial freedom, unable to open a simple bank account without their husband's permission. Generation after generation of women battled for equal access to the professional workplace. We fought for all of it. Now that we have finally established a level playing field, we are suddenly facing a brand new set of complaints. This entire controversy revolves around grievance, when it should be about protecting what. This is about respect we earned, not hating. Kendrick Perkins went deep on this during a First Take segment. Perkins argued he has covered dozens of athletes dropping wild quotes over his media career. What really jumped out to him was Sophie Cunningham's poise. She stayed completely steady, never firing back or name-calling under intense pressure, even as the outside noise kept building. Perkins noted plenty of NBA stars have said far more controversial things about highly sensitive cultural issues without ever facing this kind of coordinated, aggressive blowback from the public. Still, the locker rooms were deeply divided, and we have to be real about that friction. Several WNBA players and coaches ran a hard counterpress, arguing her statements, regardless of her actual intent, poisoned the locker room environment for teammates and opponents who did not fit her rigid biological binary. Meanwhile, rival network analysts claimed Charles Barkley stepped out of bounds on a topic he barely understood, claiming his hot takes totally stripped the nuance from a highly complex debate on athletic inclusion. That resistance matters just as much as the defense because this is not just one angry retired legend battling the WNBA. It is a fundamental ideological split between real competitors holding deeply entrenched personal beliefs about fairness in sports. Several active pros went on record saying they respect Sophie Cunningham as a hooper, but reject her framing. They insist that the hard questions around trans athletes demand far more nuance than some post-practice soundbite allows. Then came Brittney Griner, dropping a heavy dose of reality, with a balanced, middle-ground response that forced both extreme camps to actually sit back and think. Standing courtside before facing Sophie's team, Griner told reporters that managing this whole media storm had become incredibly draining, calling out the sheer volume of outside noise generated by just one single interview clip, instead of attacking Sophie Cunningham's right to her own opinion. But here is the real kicker. Sophie Cunningham, morphing into the poster child for defending women and girls, is wildly ironic. Let's look at the facts. She claims her stance is not anti-trans, but strictly about protecting young girls. Yet, she previously worked as a ring girl for an organization led by someone facing serious allegations of abusing women. On top of that, an ex-teammate exposed her for voting for a political figure with multiple sexual assault accusations involving teenage girls. Now she is suddenly crowned the ultimate savior of vulnerable young female athletes? Critics call that pure hypocrisy, but that is merely one layer of this complex sports drama. The mainstream media is laser-focused on banning trans competitors from female divisions. Meanwhile, actual trans athletes are just trying to live their lives. Some critics took Griner's comments as a quiet shot at Sophie for igniting this whole controversy. Others saw it as frustration over the media circus and non-stop reporter questions rather than personal beef. The actual truth became crystal clear just hours later. This dynamic exposes the bizarre, inverted logic driving modern sports culture. We are living in an upside-down world. Sophie Cunningham, one of the WNBA's highest-profile wings, steps up to defend what she views as female athletic integrity. Yet, the very peers she claims to protect are tearing her down, proving that policy positions do not matter, or your actual intentions. To her critics, any conservative stance translates directly to Donald Trump support, triggering pure political outrage. They fail to see she wants to preserve physical safety, ensuring biological women never have to box male-born competitors. They do not want lifetime training sessions neutralized by competitors who could not make the cut in the NBA. She is fighting a lonely battle to protect the competitive balance of women's basketball, only to get crucified by her peers. It is one of the most baffling, counterproductive paradoxes in modern sports. I have never seen a locker room this fractured. Do they actually want level playing fields? Right before tip-off, Brittney Griner and Sophie Cunningham shared a lighthearted moment on court, jokingly mimicking a viral finger-pointing meme. That simple, unscripted gesture instantly signaled that there was absolutely zero bad blood between them. It proved two professional hoopers with massive ideological differences could still share a normal, human interaction before battling it out. That single, brief clip did far more to quiet the noise than any corporate PR statement from league headquarters. The true underlying conflict here is, that while keyboard warriors and TV talking heads scream from the sidelines, the players on the actual hardwood, including Sophie Cunningham and Brittney Griner, keep showing elite emotional poise, even though Sophie still stands her ground. On the topic of these competitive fields, Cunningham has repeatedly made it clear that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, and that includes biological women, trans women, and trans men alike. She has never publicly mocked anyone, never poured fuel on this fire, and even reached out to send gifts to those teens humiliated by Keaton, showing how deeply this ugly situation resonated with her. Meanwhile, Cunningham also spoke out after that intense courtside clash, writing on social media that she truly believes there is safe spaces and love exist for everyone: biological girls, biological boys, trans women, and trans men. Everyone is welcome at her table. She added that people can disagree and still maintain their kindness, praising those young girls for standing up for their beliefs, promising to reach out, while calling the co-owner absolutely embarrassing. She called it a bad look for leadership. Her direct response to that courtside controversy exploded online, rivaling her original interview. She lauded those two teenage fans for standing up for their convictions, noting that difference of opinion shouldn't kill kindness, while directly calling out Keaton's hostile sideline behavior without demanding her firing or launching personal insults. Across this entire media storm, that measured athletic focus stayed steady, even as the outside media noise reached a deafening pitch. Look at the stark difference when you compare her composure to the hostile environments on the road. We have a franchise co-owner who literally berated kids over a thank you sign, coordinated boos every time she touched the ball, and banners designed to target her. It is hard to argue that Sophie is the one amplifying this heat, regardless of your stance on this debate. She has kept her composure intact. That cultural divide is manifesting physically right outside these arenas. On the road, a massive crowd of supporters carrying Save Women's Sports banners are showing up, facing off directly against counter-protesters holding their own opposing signs attacking Sophie's stance. Local television networks are now broadcasting these pre-game crowd clashes almost as heavily as the action on the court, forcing arena security to separate the factions on several nights. And that was incredibly simple. I hope you catch a great angle of me. Yes, indeed. Amen. When Charles Barkley finally entered the fray, he did not even need to speak to make waves. Many analysts avoid these lightning rod topics entirely, knowing there is zero upside to diving into such a heated cultural debate. But Barkley has never played it safe like that. The moment his comments hit the airwaves, a flood of opinions erupted. While some fans backed his play, others fired back, voicing the exact criticisms they had been holding back. Days after Barkley's podcast went live, Brian Urlacher's comments kept gaining traction, mainly because Gridiron fans who usually ignore WNBA headlines were suddenly locked into this story. Kendrick Perkins kept right on, defending his perspective across various media platforms, repeatedly pointing out the core, unshakable truth that Cunningham simply gave a direct, unfiltered answer to a reporter and has shown way more poise than her loudest critics. So let us get this straight. Sophie Cunningham can voice what critics call transphobic remarks, triple down on them, and keep playing without any real league discipline while putting up 9 points per game. Yet the exact moment an opponent or owner fires back at those views, they get hit with a suspension and a heavy fine. Am I reading the rulebook correctly here? Her polarizing statements regarding trans athletes in female divisions triggered an intense anti-trans demonstration outside Tuesday's game between the Storm and the Fever. Now, a second Sophie Cunningham rally, as organizers are calling it, is already scheduled for Friday's matchup in Portland against the Fire. Rather than turning every post-game presser into a referendum on personal values, the WNBA needs to keep the focus strictly on the hardwood. Over the years, plenty of pros have made statements that drew far less backlash. So why is this particular issue generating so much more noise than other locker room controversies? There is no sign of this cooling down anytime soon. Every time Cunningham takes the floor on the road, national cameras zoom in to see if the crowd keeps booing, if more banners pop up, and if the league office finally addresses this situation head-on, instead of issuing safe, reactive statements. This story catches fire on a brand new platform whenever another major figure from across the sporting landscape sounds off, whether they back her play or condemn her views. But we shouldn't celebrate Cunningham just for putting her career on the line. She is just speaking her mind, fighting to protect female athletes, and making sure they actually get a fair shot to compete, and that all of their sweat and sacrifice pays off on a level playing field. To her, this is the top priority, and she is calling on more female athletes to step up and speak out. Strip away the other noise, this is sport, and competition demands a level arena. Letting biological male athletes run against women is just robbing those female competitors of their hard-earned opportunities. That is the baseline. If we are talking athletics, we must talk about basic fairness. Right now, it is not fair. Sure, the locker room safety concerns are totally valid, and she is fully behind that. But on the court, this has to be the main battleground. It is swept under the rug way too much, and we urgently need more women to call it out because it is stealing opportunities from dedicated female athletes. All of this clearly shows that Sophie Cunningham never asked to be the poster child for this massive national debate over equity in women's sports. She just gave a straight answer to a direct question, stood her ground under fire, and kept her cool even as the heat got dialed up around her. This firestorm did not start with Charles Barkley speaking out, but his support confirms what many suspected, that a huge number of people in the sports world actually agree with her, regardless of how loud the online outrage machine gets. That is our report. Back to you.